Welcome, everyone. The Pack is back with special guest, as you see here to my right, Paul Bretl joining us. I do assume that's how it's pronounced, Bretl, right?
Nailed it.
Okay, very good. But yeah, Paul coming to join us here tonight. Really excited. For anyone, you must be living under a rock at this point if you have not been seeing Paul's incredible training camp updates all over Twitter, really on top of everything. So it's been great to see. And so, Paul, again, thank you so much for coming in. And how have you been, kind of enjoying this training camp? I could be wrong, but I feel like this is the first one you've been at to this extent.
Yeah, this is the first one. Last year I kind of started what I'm doing now once the regular season began. But it's been a ton of fun. I know we know there's a lot of question marks on this team, but there's a lot of excitement too. Matt LaFleur said it best. There's unknown, but that's kind of what makes it exciting as well. Tons of speed, tons of versatility. I'm sure stuff we'll get into here, but I thought that it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've been the last few years, I made sure to go to at least a few training camps. It's always a good time. So I can't imagine being there at all of them. I wish. But real quick, let me just address maybe the elephant in the room here, Riley. Zach and Jen, unfortunately, schedules got a little bit mixed up. They're not going to make it tonight, but I expect them to be a part of the show, obviously, regularly going forward, as they always are. But for tonight, it'll be me and Paul. I'm sure you'll still have a great time. So, yes, and this was the I'm pulling a little bit like a Pat McAfee kind of situation. I'm trying to figure out the best layout here in my new, very small studio apartment. So right now, I'm very comfortable here on my 2 feet. But, Paul, I like your setup. I like the paint you got going on behind you. And it looks like Rodgers, and who's over your left shoulder?
Other side. Bart Starr.
Bart Starr.
I'm looking for a Jordan Love one. I haven't been able to find one yet, so we're in the market.
Right there in the middle. It'll be the perfect trio. But all right, so let's dive into a little bit Packers football. And I feel like today, kind of impossible to start with any other news than Rashawn Gary returning to practice. I was pretty caught off guard. I thought he'll be back kind of soon, but did not expect him back this early. Paul, what was, the vibe and the energy when he came back on the field, going out, lining up with the defense? What was that like in person?
Yeah, Rashawn Gary said that obviously he was incredibly excited. He was limited to individual drills. Matt LaFleur beforehand said that was going to be the extent of his practice today. I assume there's going to be a bit of a workup period for him. We know that the Packers historically are pretty conservative when it comes to injuries. And so the fact that Rashawn Gary's back, I think in about 9 months or so, goes to show the effort and everything that he's put in to get to this point. But so he was like I said, just working through individual drills. But, last season, the depth of the edge rusher room, a year ago was a big question mark. And then unfortunately, when he got injured, we saw why. This edge rusher group struggled to put up or to pressure at a regular rate without him. Rashawn Gary, before he went down, was one of the most productive edge rushers in football, both from a pass rush standpoint, but he also held up well against the run too. So it goes without saying, but his return is going to be massive for this defense.
Yeah, Rashawn Gary, just one of those players that I feel like we're finally seeing the full potential of what he's going to be at the end of 2020 and the beginning of last year. And the injury, that's obviously really tough. But I do like that you brought up the outside linebacker group, because even though it's a lot of young and maybe unproven, I feel like we're in a much better position this year than last year. Obviously, Ben Ness, but then Hollins, who was pretty decent last year and has been playing a lot with the ones, seems like he's definitely in line for a roster spot. Of course, you have Brenton Cox, who's been making a lot of noise, the undrafted free agent. And while it's, of course, always, sad to see guys get cut, but I feel like then moving on from Jonathan Garvin and Ladarius Hamilton was a really positive sign for these guys they have in Hollins, Van Ness, Cox, and Ibarra, of course, with the big rookie season. So that's the outside linebacker. A couple other pieces of news from today's practice. Grant Dubose, rookie 7th-round receiver. I believe this was his first practice, right, Paul?
Yep. Yeah, first one since joining the Packers. He hasn't practiced at all. Matt LaFleur said a few weeks ago was a back injury, and he's going to have some catching up to do. Matt LaFleur said there's you can study as hard as you want off the field, but there's nothing that replicates those live practice reps. And I'm not even sure at this point if they keep a 6 wide receiver. I think it's certainly possible. But if we think about how much 2 tight end, 2 running back sets they'll use, how active those position groups are in the passing game, plus the 5 receivers on the depth chart that are going to be ahead of that 6 receiver, it's not as if there's going to be this, even with the unknowns to a degree at receiver, it's not as if there's this huge number of snaps available. So DeBose is going to have to come in. He's got to, play some catch up. He's got a limited time, but joint practices are coming up. Preseason games, obviously an opportunity for all these young guys to make some noise. And he's going to have to leapfrog right now. Bo Melton and Malik Heath, 2 guys who have had really strong starts to training camp. I asked LaFleur about them today, and he, commented something similar, but also added the caveat that they're going to have to continue to do this during the preseason action as well. We got 2 weeks under our belt, but in terms of the stuff that carries the most weight in regards to who's going to be on the team, that stuff's still upcoming.
Yeah, we're really now getting into, as they say, the meat and potatoes of training camp and preseason, because the last week plus, the last few days there were pads, but it's been a while with no pads, so we're really just getting into it. But so you think that's interesting. I think most years the Packers have had 6 receivers to open the season. I assume the 5 you're talking are Watson, Dobbs, Toure, Reed, and Wicks.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
and if they come out with 6 on the 53, I'm not going to be surprised by any means, but I just don't necessarily know that it's a given either. I think if Heath or Melton or can continue doing what they're doing, or DeBose steps in and performs right away, I just right now need to see a larger sample size from that group, because there's a lot of crowded position groups. You mentioned edge rusher previously. That's 6 guys. Are they going to keep 6? So if you keep an extra receiver, it's a decision there. 5 or 6 interior defenders. Are they going to keep 5 safeties and go heavy there? There's just a lot of position groups. Offensive line, 9 or 10. A lot of position groups where they're going to have to make those tough decisions.
Yeah, especially with such a young roster. So many guys that really haven't had the chance to prove themselves, and they're just going to have to kind of take a leap of faith on some of them, and kind of taking a leap of faith on someone that, was maybe a bit of a surprise signing, Nathan McCrary today at running back. You have obviously Jones, Dillon, and then, Tyler Goodson. Every day it's like Goodson's doing this, Goodson's doing that. And then, of course, Patrick Taylor, and then I'm blanking on the
Lou Nichols.
Lou Nichols, but the guy they brought in, the undrafted player.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with so Nichols has been out the last 2 practices. He took a big hit on last Thursday and found out today he's sidelined with a shoulder injury. So I think looking ahead to the preseason game, maybe he's back on the practice field later this week, but we don't know that right now. Yeah. And Jones and Dillon, I'm guessing, aren't going to be taking snaps in the preseason game. So if that's the case, you're left with Taylor, Goodson, and then Emmanuel Wilson. So I think that McCrary was brought in, to just bolster the depth with the unknown around Nichols, and then the 2 front line guys probably not taking snaps.
So kind of just a cam body is what you're basically expecting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Chris, I'm with you on this. My pre-training camp 53-man prediction did have Goodson winning that number 3 job. Paul, do you see him starting potentially Friday night?
Yeah, so Matt LaFleur said that what they're going to do, there's 3 preseason games, 3 running backs. We just named them, Goodson, Nichols, Taylor, competing for that 3rd role. So each guy's going to be featured in a game. Might be a half, might be a little over. So right now, if I were guessing, we saw Patrick Taylor getting some reps, even with the starters on Monday's practice here. So I do wonder if he's going to be the focal point at running back on Friday of this week. But each guy's going to get their opportunity. And we obviously gravitate towards how do they perform with the ball in their hands. But both Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst just last week talked about pass blocking and special teams being really, really important to deciding that 3rd running back role. Because, again, Jones and Dillon are going to take the bulk of the carries. If you're on the roster, the 48-man or 46-man, whatever it is now on game day, how are you going to contribute? So those are going to be really key factors. One other thing that I'll say Goodson has going in his favor is we've seen him used a lot, and kind of, sure many have seen that Tyler Ervin gadget type role. And, as the old saying goes, the more you can do. So that's a way for him, even with Jones and Dillon at running back, to find some potential snaps on offense. But he's been really, really good with the ball in his hands, explosive, good burst, good vision. They've lined him up in the slot. They've lined him up out wide. I mean, just in terms of the versatility that they like at running back, like he just checks all those boxes. So I right now would have him as the front runner, but I think what we'll have to see when preseason starts is what role is he going to carve out on special teams? Because again, that matters. We've seen him last season and even a little this year used as a return man, but they have Keyshawn Nixon. They have Jaden Reed. I don't see him being that guy. So what roles can he carve out? Because I mean, Patrick Taylor's special teams play last year, blocking ability, that was a big reason why he was the third running back for a lot of the season.
Yeah, there's no doubt that in general, we all know the Packers special team struggles, and it matters, it matters who's out there for them. And also realistically, when you have Jones and Dillon, your third back, you're really hoping is probably not touching the ball too much on offense. So special teams is really where they're going to have to shine. So we'll see how that whole battle shakes out. I do like that LaFleur's giving each guy a chance to be featured, because I think a lot of people think that during the regular season, where it's like, if Jones is going, keep giving it to him. If Dillon's going, keep giving it to him. I'm not a huge fan of the switch up, but I guess we'll see how it goes. And then lastly, for today's practice, just a few guys that did not practice. Jake Hansen in his games, who's been having a nice camp from what I'm seeing, missed practice. Lou Nichols, we just talked about. Josiah DeGuara and Eric Stokes, who's obviously not practiced yet, coming off that ankle injury last year. But let's look forward, I guess, towards the Bengals and kind of what, we haven't even talked. We're 12 minutes in. I don't think the name Jordan Love has come up yet, which is pretty shocking. So were you at family night?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So real quick, in person, what were your takeaways from his performance on family night? And I guess just your general feelings, maybe what you were thinking before training camp started about him, and if that's changed or gotten better or worse or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll start with family night. It was a bit of a shaky start. There were some overthrows. He had Luke Musgrave on a crosser, and then I think it might have been the next play or two later, Luke Musgrave going down the seam. And those are throws Jordan Love has to hit, but he overthrew them. Romeo Doubs had a step down the right sideline on Jair Alexander, overthrew him as well. And afterwards, Matt LaFleur said that there was some adrenaline, a little extra juice in him, and I think that's what we saw with the overthrows. But he settled in really, really well. There obviously weren't any turnovers, and nothing that I would even consider a turnover-worthy play that the defense didn't capitalize on. He took what was available to him, and we saw some big plays generated, especially in that last 2-minute drill that they did on a crossing route again from Musgrave. I think very similar to the one that he missed earlier. He hit him for a big gain. There was then a slant to Christian Watson for a catch and run opportunity. And then from about the 21-yard line, found Watson on the right side of the end zone, placed it really well. Ballantyne was very close in coverage, couldn't get to the ball. Also a really nice contested catch by Christian Watson. So I thought that overall, once he got through those initial, passes, it was a very solid performance from him and what you hope to see. As far as where he currently stands compared to what I had thought before, it's about the same. And I think a lot of how you feel about his performance goes to what were your expectations? For me, the first time starting quarterback, I'm expecting a lot of ups and downs. That there's that pass that was all over Twitter to Christian Watson downfield. Well, before that, he bounced one off of Quay Walker's chest. There's things to clean up, but I guess to me, that's what I expected to see from him. And I think the important part, as well, he's a first-time starter. We also have to remember that he's in his fourth year too. We need to see progression, especially when the regular season starts. That's the whole benefit or hopeful benefit of sitting a quarterback for a year, or in this case, 3 years, that the learning curve is a lot shorter and they can make a greater impact sooner. So that's what I feel like we need to see from him. I feel like we're seeing that incrementally in the practices. Matt LaFleur has talked about it's process over results, with the thought being if that process is done right and consistently, the results are going to follow. Yeah. And by process, it's everything before the throw. Getting in and out of the huddle efficiently, throwing in timing, rhythm, good mechanics, footwork, progression, all that stuff. And we're seeing at times more consistency with that, and it's turning into better results. But again, it's still about the consistency. And I know we keep going back to that, but that's really what it is. Cause we see the wow throws, the one to Watson I referenced, that back shoulder to Jaden Reed went through his hands, but beautiful. There's a couple others like that. So we see the ceiling, we see the potential that's there. Now it's just about harnessing that and, having it take place more regularly.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, like you said, with the first year starter, it's not all going to be perfect. You just hope to see. I mean, if you all remember back in 2008, Aaron Rodgers' first year, the team finishes 6-10. But like you said, the consistent progression throughout that year, I don't think anyone after 2008 was panicking. I think everyone felt really good about what their future looked like. And obviously 2 years later, we win the Super Bowl. So this year, expectations, I'm not even really so much worried about the record. It's all just going to be about Love and how he looks and what he can, like you said, progress throughout the season. That's going to be really big. And also, when you wait for 3 years and you come in, you're going to have a shorter leash, or at least in my opinion, you should. You're not a rookie. You've been around. You've seen a lot. You did start one game in your career, played sparingly in some others. Again, it doesn't mean 35 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. It doesn't have to be that, but if it's just totally abysmal, it's going to be harder to say, well, as a rookie, we could wait another few years. That's not really going to be the case so much. So obviously, big preseason for Jordan Love. But outside of Love, who's someone that, whether it's this Thursday night or Friday night, I should say, or generally throughout the preseason, one player you're really excited to kind of see get out there and play at full speed?
I mean, Lucas Van Ness, I don't think there's been anyone just because of his style of play that could benefit more from having the pads on and really being able to go full speed. His burst at the snap, his power that he plays with, living up to the Hercules name. There's one rep that comes to mind where he had Yash Nyman on his heels, another where he just absolutely drove Josiah DeGora into the backfield. And one thing I'll say that I've been that's caught my attention is actually his ability against the run. He's an edge rusher. We think about pressures, we think about sacks, especially again with the physical tools that he has. But he's had a number of impressive run defense snaps, either setting the edge, forcing the ball carrier back inside, recognizing that it is a run play, and working into the backfield or filling the gap depending on where he is. So I've been really impressed with him in that regard. Another position I'll be watching, safety. I feel like it's separated in terms of, all right, we know who's competing for playing time right now, Savage, Ford, Moore, and Jonathan Owens, but they've been rotating pretty heavily that position. It was Savage and Ford for a long time as the starters. The last 3 practices, we've seen Owens in there for Rudy Ford. Tavarius Moore has gotten some snaps as well. So I'm just really curious to see that position in action just because there's a ton of unknowns. And then one other name I'll throw out there just to kind of in a similar mold as Van Ness is just Luke Musgrave. He's just, Matt LaFleur said it best, he's different. We haven't seen a tight end in Green Bay like that in a very long time. There's the big play potential that he brings himself, and we're going to see him over the middle, down the seam a ton. I think we're going to see him out wide, but a fair amount as well. There was one rep this year where he was matched up against Corey Ballantyne and just beat him downfield. Just really, really impressive. And then with that, the attention he draws, the spacing he creates, that's opportunities for others as well. So there's a ton to keep our eyes on. We could mention Zach Tom, Josh Myers at center, but those are kind of the big things on my radar, along with Jordan Love, of course, right?
Of course. But I'm super excited about Jaden Reed, but something about Luke Musgrave, just like you said, it's been so long since we've had a tight end, even close to that. I guess we go back to Finley, but that's been about a decade at this point. And you saw, the short clip from Family Night where he has Darnell Savage falling on his face behind him, trying to keep up. I'm seeing all, your updates from camp, Andy's updates from camp, just basically saying that Musgrave moves differently than any tight end you generally see, getting open a lot. So that's just really exciting to hear about. And then we're not even discussing the tight end. Tucker Kraft is right behind them. So I really love what they did at the tight end position. But another position that was a concern, especially once Mason Crosby was gone, was kicker, of course. They addressed it in the draft. The start of training camp was a bit shaky, kind of worrisome for a lot of people. I was definitely pretty concerned about it, but I feel like Anders Carlson, since Family Night, has just been on a tear, hitting basically every single kick, including some really long distance ones. What have you seen out of him, and how big is that leg? I keep saying he has a huge leg, huge leg. How does it look in person?
It's huge. Today he was kicking 51, 52, 53 yarders, and the wind was coming in and from the right towards him, and he was clearing the bar easily. I mean,
Wow.
I'm going to assume here that, you put him up if they're in range, at the 60-yard mark, like he could get there. Like that's not going to be an issue for him. But Brian Gutekunst said it best. He's a rookie kicker. They knew there'd be ups and downs, and that patience was going to be required. But I can't speak to how big I feel like family night was for him, because he had a rough week of practices up until that point. So with a packed stadium, kind of close to game-like environment in Lambeau with the crowd, for him to come out and go 8 for 9, and really the miss, I'm not even going to put on him. It was a high snap that, interfered with the hold, and just from the get-go, the operation never really gave Carlson a chance. So he performed incredibly well. And after seeing that performance, something that stuck out with me was when Rich Bisaccia was talking about him after they took him. He mentioned two things. They love his big game experience and his mental makeup, which, for me, trying to interpret that, I take that as, his resiliency, his ability to bounce back. He misses a kick, he's back out there the next time, pretty much unfazed. And I feel like in that environment, giving that performance after a tough week, we got a glimpse of that and what the Packers liked about him. So, there's going to be more of those ups and downs along the way. Again, he's a rookie kicker, especially how is he going to fare when it starts to become, November, December, January here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But I think his performance, given how the previous week had gone on family night, was impressive and much needed.
Yeah, and we all know so much of kicking is mental, and I'm sure having a rough week of practice was not helping.
Mm-hmm.
And then to go out, like you said, in his first real big Green Bay moment, to go and have such a great performance has to be huge for him mentally. So I'm really excited about that, because I get what Goody's saying. Yes, a rookie kicker, there'll be ups and downs, but in my opinion, if you're a kicker kicking under 60% in the NFL, that's just not going to cut it. So I'm happy that, I hope he can be, our next Mason Crosby, because we've taken for granted so much of kicking over the last 15 years. Every week you see, whether it was the Chargers for every year for a decade, or the Falcons or the Bears or whatever it is, this team's just losing on 38-yard kicks to win a game. Yes. And it's we haven't really dealt with that. We had one rough year with Mason, but basically always great. So let's hope that continues. And in general, special teams, really, Rich Bisaccia already, improved last year, still had some ups and downs, but hopefully this year it really continues. I guess while we're on the topic, what are your thoughts on the punter battle? Because I'm hearing a lot of good stuff about Daniel Whelan.
Yeah, we're talking about power with Carlson. Daniel Whelan, he's got a leg. If it came down to, just pure power, he's got the advantage over Pat O'Donnell pretty easily. But as we know, there's more that goes into it. And the big thing is the holding. Right now on each of Carlson's field goal attempts, Whelan and O'Donnell are alternating. And we know the holding aspect of it was a big reason why O'Donnell was even signed a year ago. Corey Bojorquez in 21, he has a big leg, but struggled with holding. So O'Donnell provided that stability. And you just mentioned some of the concerns that you can have, or the ups and downs that you can experience with a rookie kicker. I mean, a rookie kicker and a rookie holder, that's just a whole lot of unknown. So I have to see how it plays out. Right now, I would probably still give O'Donnell the edge just for that reason that I mentioned, but they're in a transition year. Not that they don't want to win games, but if they could potentially find their kicker of the future and potentially their punter of the future, while knowing they're going to weather the storm in the process, I have to think that might be, something that they're willing to consider. And if they do move on from O'Donnell, they save, I think, $1.5 million in cap space. Not that that's enough, in my opinion, to determine it. Oh, yep, we save this, we're doing it. But it's another added benefit. So we'll have to see how they perform. But I very much believe that there's a battle going on, much more so than what I did even 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I in my head, I thought, really, you bring in someone, it's a camp body, some competition, whatever. but I was not expecting it to get this serious. And we'll see, because, if he can prove to really be that guy, like you said, nothing wrong with finding your punter of the future, because if you let him go and some team picks him up and it works out, you might feel kind of silly about that. But I guess we'll see.
Have they ever had one of those? Is that even a term, punter of the future?
Yeah, punter of the future. I don't know, but I feel like it wouldn't be a bad thing considering our history with special teams.
Yes.
There's a couple other position battles that I think are really interesting right now, and that one of them is at center, because with Josh Myers, it's been such a mixed bag throughout his entire career. And it's mostly right now been kind of on a down slope. And then this training camp, there's been a ton of fluctuation at center, guys being cut, guys being brought in, guys being played at center, moved all over. Of course, Zach Tom has been there. Sean Ryan, I think, has been there. So that's like pretty concerning to me, considering your starting center right now doesn't seem like a very clear choice. And then you add to that I think there's been 5 fumbled snaps throughout training camp, which seems like an astronomical number to be happening. So from your point of view, just how much jeopardy is Josh Myers in his job?
I think quite a bit, if I'm being honest. And one thing that really sticks with me going back to the offseason, Brian Gutekunst said that when they're evaluating Tom, they thought center was his best position. And his time at Wake Forest the last 2 years were mostly spent at left tackle. So his center days came back in his freshman or first and second years of significant playing time. So that's something that stuck with me. And it's the consistency with Myers. We're seeing the fumbles, and we saw it last year. Like, there are stretches of good football from him, but it's just the ups and downs. And those ups and downs again get magnified when you got a first-time starting quarterback, young skill position player. So the more stability you can have off the get-go, obviously a ton more value in that. I think ultimately what's going to be the deciding factor is because, LaFleur says best five. Zach Tom is one of the best 5. He's going to be out there. So where's the bigger gap? Is it between Tom and Myers, or is it between Tom and Nyman at right tackle? Because offensive line, it's the sum of the parts are better than the individual. You can have the best left side in football, but if your right side's not very good, your overall unit is probably going to maybe be average or worse. Yeah. So where does Tom's presence make the unit best? And right now, I very much think it's possible that he's playing at center come week 1, and then Nyman is at right tackle.
Yeah, I was just talking to my brother the other day, and it might be a bit early, and we'll see how the preseason goes, but I'm basically already there with what you just said, with Tom at center, Nyman at right tackle. Bottom line, we're 3, right? This is Myers' 4th year now. If you're still having questions, like, that's pretty legitimate, especially from someone who was a day 1 starter. It's not like we waited a year and a half to see what he had. He's been starting from day 1. Now we're in year 4, still some concerns. And like you said, Zach Tom not only has experience at center, but like you said, the team thinks that might be his best overall position. And I'm pretty confident in Yash at right tackle. He might not be a Pro Bowler, but I would see him as like a liability. Probably not as much as I see Myers' liability at center. So going to be a really big training camp in preseason for a former second-round pick that, just real quick, like, what do you think there when it came to him and Creed Humphrey? Because Creed Humphrey was, the guy, the center of that draft. And I keep seeing people saying maybe because he was a lefty and he snaps with his left hand. Rodgers never had that. That seems so small. But then again, I don't know exactly what it's like to switch that exchange. But do you think it could have been something as simple as being a righty versus a lefty, or what did you see there?
I'll be honest. I'm like everyone else, where I'm not really sure. I mean, maybe it was his zone blocking experience from Ohio State, but I'll be honest that I'm not really sure, because I think
maybe it's
most following the draft agreed that Creed Humphrey was the best option. So I don't know.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising, but again, I hope Myers proves us all wrong, because it would be great to have him at center, Tom at right tackle, and have a really solid backup tackle with Nyman. So we'll see how that goes, and then switching right across the line to nose tackle, defensive tackle. Been a really big offseason, because we knew coming into the draft it was Kenny Clark, and then really no one. I mean, I'm not calling Wyatt and Slate no one, but at the time, very young, unproven guys. And now here we are a few months later. Wyatt and Slate have had some really big training camps. Of course, you add Lucas Van Ness in the draft, who can play inside and out. You add Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden, Jonathan Ford's even, made some plays. So how are you seeing that position in general? Because I'm kind of feeling like it went from a real weakness to a possible strength at some point in the near future.
So I'll add the caveat that I need to see this group, like everyone else, perform when it matters and do so for an extended period of time. But I've been really impressed with the interior defensive line group. TJ Slayton, he's having a really, really good training camp, making noises as a pass rusher as well. Devontae Wyatt, those flashes a week ago are becoming more consistent, especially as a pass rusher. Carl Brooks has put together a really, really nice week of practices, and Colby Wooden has really established himself as the fourth man in that rotation. And to go off on a slight tangent, that Play Callers podcast that was sponsored by brought to you by The Athletic, is focused on the offensive side of the ball, but they had Brandon Staley on there, the Chargers head coach, and he was talking about his defensive scheme, which, as we know, Joe Barry was brought here by Matt LaFleur to run a version of that. And what he was talking about with the interior line is they want speed and they want versatility. The Packers have versatility, and this unit this year, with Wyatt playing a larger role, the addition of Brooks and Wooden, it looks so much faster. And so, so you get more of those gap penetrators rather than the Dean Lowrys, the Tyler Lancasters that we've seen in the years, where they're more kind of space eaters, just clogging the middle. And so it really feels like there was a concerted effort on Gutekunst's part and the others involved in those decisions to bring in that specific type of interior defender so that they can play that specific kind of way. And so I've been really impressed with that group, just their consistency. It's been really hard for the offense to run between the tackles throughout training camp so far. And, we look at how is this defense going to improve from last season. It starts with the run game. Like that's the be all end all for them. There's a third down stat from last season I feel really encapsulates their run performance. The Packers actually had the 8th best third down defense in football. Wow. The problem was they faced the fewest third downs per game. So if they're stopping the run on the first down, on second down, whatever it may be, they're putting their defense in a position to be successful. The pass rush, one of the strengths of this unit, can go get the quarterback on third downs. You got playmakers in the secondary. But the problem was offenses weren't getting to third down because they were ripping off these huge runs early on. So to me, that's where the success of this unit is going to begin. How do they perform better against the run?
Yeah, it's obviously so important, but especially when I feel like year after year after year, we're talking about stopping the run. And also when outside of Kenny Clark, who never felt like there was really anyone else making meaningful plays on the interior. Like you mentioned, Dean Lowry, like, no offense, you've been around with the Packers for a while, great, but like he was not only on the team for, I think, longer than most teams would have had. He was playing so many snaps week after week, year after year, when I think a lot of teams, it just wouldn't have happened. He wasn't doing enough. And then you could say the same for Tyler Lancaster or some other guys. So I'm really excited to see just that like youth resurgence, because really it's Kenny Clark and then a second-year player in Wyatt, some rookies, some like really young guys, and Carl Brooks specifically is someone that I loved in the pre-draft process. I was really surprised that Packers got him as late as they did, and I'm just really excited to see what he can do as a rookie. You mentioned Colby Wooden, and of course Slayton having, I feel like Slayton having a big training camp is almost the most like out of nowhere kind of guy to step up, which is great because you can never have too many. So that's really exciting. Of course, like you said, it's all going to come down to seeing it in real time, real competition. Right now, everyone looks great. Everyone's having the best camp of their lives. See it when it actually matters. So we'll see how all that goes. But Paul, before we head out, I do have to ask you one very important question about your world famous smoked wings. I'm a big wing guy, so please don't, as they say, gatekeep or whatever it is.
So, Ben, always appreciate the question and enthusiasm around the wings. I actually haven't made them in a while. I bet you it's been a year plus. I've reverted to using the grill as far as the handling of the wings. So it's been a little bit, and I appreciate the world famous, acknowledgement, but it has been a little bit, but I've been happy with how they've been turning it out on the grill. Maybe we'll have to do a taste test.
All right. That sounds good. Chris, I don't. I just don't. I don't know what to tell you when I have hair. I know you want me to be bald. It's just not the case. But I appreciate it anyway, Chris. But yeah, Paul, awesome stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us tonight. Again, everything you're doing for Packers Twitter has been amazing at Packers training camp, and I'm sure it's going to continue throughout the season. Everyone at the bottom of the screen, if you're not already following Paul for some reason, you see his handle right there, Paul_Bretl. But other than that, Paul, any other things you want to plug, anything else you got going on you want people to know about?
I'll just say follow me, as you mentioned, on Twitter, Paul_Bretl. My work's over at Packers Wire. I got a YouTube channel as well. It's just my name. Check out the videos, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. I appreciate it, Eli.
Absolutely. Everyone make sure to check out Paul's YouTube channel, subscribe. Of course, follow the Pack on Twitter at the Pack_show. You can find me at Book of Eli_NFL, and give Zach and Jen a follow as well. You see their handles right there at the bottom of the screen. Everyone, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. We should be back next week after our first Packers football game in a long time. So that's very exciting. Everyone, thank you. Have a great night, and we will see you next time.